this is going to be maybe little bit of a different dev meet to what we normally do, in that it's not going to be hugely devy. We're not going to be talking about code and whatnot, especially. We're going to talk a bit about this OpenAI project and what it is. Some of you may be familiar with it already. If you're not, then don't worry. I'll do the elevator pitch, and then we're going to have a play around with some live demos to kind of get a feel for the sorts of things this technology could be used for. So it's going to be like live TV. Stuff could go wrong and probably will go wrong, but we'll see. And it'll be fun either way, because we're talking about AI. So OpenAI, I've popped a picture of Elon Musk here, and I've written our Saviour/downfall. I think, for reasons that I'll explain, this is a tremendously exciting technology, and let's say, we feel closer than ever, in my mind, to being at that tipping point where Skynet could actually happen. So we'll see how it goes. So let's do a quick introduction, a brief history of OpenAI and the project in general. So it was founded in 2015 by founders, including Elon Musk, which is why I put a picture of Elon Musk there. Sam Altman as well, guy who started Y Combinator, were the two most prominent founders of this. And one of their motivations for starting this project was a desire to counter the existential threat posed by artificial intelligence. I mean, you can imagine Elon Musk saying this. So he, in that sort of blue sky way he does, said AI could be dangerous. Let's start a thing that instead of that tries to use AI for the betterment of all mankind. And so they started OpenAI as a project. The core offering of this, let's call it a service, or the core product, or whatever you want to call it, is a tech called GPT-3. Is a successor to GPT and GPT-2. It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which all sounds very impressive. Now, I'm not qualified or able to fully explain the ways in which artificial intelligence algorithms and machine learning techniques and all that work. It is a massively interesting topic. So definitely something that, if you felt like it, you could go and research it. We're more going to talk about the end result. But one thing that is interesting about the way GPT-3 works, I think is worth commenting on, as compared to some other sort of machine learning models, is that it's unsupervised. And what this kind of means is that in an incredibly basic way, which is the only way I can explain it, there's sort of a couple of different strategies which you can kind of use for creating machine learning. One of those strategies might be to upfront have sort of tagged all this information or grouped all the information that you're going to be putting into your model with human knowledge, i.e., like, I as a human know that Volvo, Mercedes and whatnot are makes of car, so I can create a big long list of manufacturers of car, and that can provide that as a seed which is tagged for sort of makes of car. So if my machine learning algorithm gets asked about manufacturers of car, or it's given a piece of text that has Mercedes in it, it can infer from that what we're talking about cars. That would be supervised because it requires human curation up front to populate the model. GPT-3 uses an unsupervised model, which is kind of interesting. The idea is that given enough information and with the algorithms to back it up, which is all sort of neural network and clever stuff that don't know how it works, but the idea is that with enough information, the model can actually start to infer its own context just by the fact that certain words get used with certain other words more frequently. And by analyzing this huge amount of data and adapting to it, it can ultimately understand that Mercedes, quote unquote, understand that Mercedes is a make of car, because that's how that word is always used in context with all these other words. And so it's it's a bit spooky, and I don't really understand it, but it does work, and it's pretty cool. And when we're talking about the amount of data that's used to populate this model, we're talking about huge amounts of data. So GPT-3 has, and this isn't the complete list, there's more on top of this, but it's using about 410 billion tokens, pieces of text that have been crawled from the web. It's using about an additional 67 billion that have come from books, another 3 billion from Wiki, and more on top of that as well. So we're talking about incredible amounts of data, and I think this project is something like 10 times more expansive in terms of the amount of parameters that it is processing versus the next best, quote unquote, again, best similar AI out there. OpenAI was not for profit until 2019. And I've made a point of this because point two, the idea of this being a benevolent thing, makes sense with me in a not-for-profit context, but then when you apply it to a for-profit context, we start to get more into Cyberdyne territory, I feel. And in 2019, Microsoft invested $1 billion in this tech, and Microsoft are now kind of the largest partner in this tech, and it's since been turned into a service, so to speak. So before I go on and start to talk more about it, I want to just kind of frame AI in general, because it's one of those very buzzwordy type things. We talk about AI and machine learning, we throw that kind of around a lot. And certainly in my head, when we sort of boil down to it, you end up like converging on a couple of different things. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's like Siri or whatever, or or Google Assistant, or we're talking about chatbots and things like that. And whilst it's true that yes, those are two use cases for artificial intelligence as a technology, I think having a play around with OpenAI has opened my eyes a little bit more to just how wide-reaching this sort of tech can be in terms of its potential applications. It's far more than that. Things like Siri and whatnot are the kind of like Hollywood implementations of it. But actually, this just scratching the surface, in terms of how this kind of tech could, well, benefit, enrich, harm, threaten our day-to-day life, all those sorts of things. And then OpenAI itself, so it is an API that you can use. I put myself on the waiting list to try it out last July, and got off the waiting list about a month ago. So it's been a long time coming, but it's been really fun to have a go with it. And the other thing I will note up front is it is a paid for thing. I've had a certain amount of free credit as part of the beta trial, but it is a paid for thing. And for reasons I'll go into in the next thing, it's not necessarily cheap. So I don't think this is going to be the sort of thing that is going to be sweeping, the web immediately, but the potential's there. So let's talk about kind of how it works. So it is a sort of kind of a single endpoint API, essentially, is what OpenAI is. And the way it works is that you submit a prompt, and you then submit, so you submit a prompt and a few other configuration parameters, which I'll talk about in a second, and it responds with the response. And that's it. It's just a pure text thing. And so what you're attempting to do with the prompt is you're kind of trying to teach in a concise way, teach OpenAI what it is you want it to respond with. So in this example that comes from their website, the idea is that by providing some examples here of questions and answers, you can kind of in a single shot, this would be a multiple shot, That's the sort of terminology they use. But in this package, you can kind of have said, oh, okay, I recognize that you want me to provide an answer to a question because this is the pattern. And then also this is also teaching it that if it can't answer the question, or if it's some sort of nonsense word like, what is torsalplexity, it should just respond rather than trying to like answer, which is maybe what it would instinctively do. It'll just respond with, I don't know, or like a question mark. And so there's a real kind of art to writing these prompts, because what you're trying to do is convey as much information as you think it might need to get the gist, as concisely as possible, kind of thing. And there's a few strategies you can use here. There's zero shot. This is why they call it something shot. So you could use zero shot, which would be you haven't given it any training at all. You just say, who is Batman? And hope it can respond correctly. This can work in some scenarios, but it's not necessarily going to know that you want an answer to that question. For example, it might respond, who is Superman? It might think that you actually want it to respond with other questions that are about comic book characters, for instance. It won't necessarily implicitly know that you want an answer to that question. So the idea here is that you're training it that, no, what it wants is question this, answer that. And then you could do a one shot. So a one shot thing would be, I just provide the first one here, or you can do multi-shot. And the idea is that the more you give it, the more accurate the response is going to be. And I think some of the kind of like most high profile examples that have done the rounds on the internet, where you've had people using the tech to like, we're going to build you an application using just a description of an application, I imagine have had quite detailed prompts put in, quite, don't want to say curated, but quite heavily specified prompts so that, it can respond in quite specific ways. For example, actually, I won't do the for example, we'll get to it when we talk about it. So, and there are some other parameters that you sort of provide it as well. So, you can tell it, it encourages you to sort of think about it in a human way, which is both intuitive and also a bit frightening. So you sort of you tell it sort of how creative, so to speak, you want it to be, and the more free rein you give it, the more outrageous it's going to be with its responses. Again, outrageous is a human word, but and the less freedom you give it, the more deterministic it gets. So as you gravitate towards zero, you get towards a point where every time you give it this prompt, it's going to respond with the exact same thing, which is sometimes exactly what you want and sometimes not. And across the examples we're gonna play around with, we've got a variety of those different things. You can also tell it to, how long you want the response to be, which can be important sometimes. You can tell it whether you want it to actually, rather than just generating one response and replying with it, you could say actually do a best of three, and give me that, give me the best answer from those three, or more, doesn't have to be three. And then you can do other things. You can configure it in other ways to sort of make it less likely to repeat information, make it less likely to deviate from the topic that you've seeded it with, all those kind of things. So that's all kind of cool, but let's actually have a bit of a play with what we could actually use it for. So I've got some examples here, which are going to hopefully cover a whole range of different things. So the first one I've called Air Show. So the idea here is that it can show you how OpenAI can be used to actually extract information that you might use, might use as like a data set from just a piece of plain text. So I was thinking of, we have a client like Farnborough, who might have a description of what plane can do, but maybe they don't have that information actually, in a data table that would be useful for then maybe putting into an app or a website or something along those lines. They just have descriptions of stuff. This can be, I've experienced this pain before when working with museums or whatever, where they've got these amazing records of things, but it's not actually, tabulated or whatever. So the idea is I've written a piece of text with a top speed of 500 miles an hour and a wingspan of 150 feet. I've actually got a typo there on 150 feet. That doesn't matter. The cruiser P40, which I've made up, that's not a real plane as far as I'm aware, is a popular plane for commercial flights of 200 people or less. It can reach an altitude of 20,000 feet. So I'm going to ask it to give me stats from that. And it can actually extract that information and present it to me. And I can do things like, rather than using the number, I could write 150 feet. Let's correct the typo. Let's actually, rather than writing 150, let's change the number. 200, let's say, 200 feet. And it still can pull out that, it can recognize that text. I could do, like, if I'm talking about the capacity, I could do 3 to 400 people. And it'll recognize that there's a capacity there that it's actually, when I did this in testing, it actually came up with 4. So it's not quite as good. I could probably train that a little bit better because it should recognize that 400 is the maximum capacity there. But you can see it still plucked out those numbers from text as well. 3 and 100 aren't next to each other, and it's still been able to place those together and figure out that that's the capacity. I've also not written capacity anywhere in my text. It knows that because I've said 200, 400 people it can carry, it's got there. So, you can think about this for like a client like Baking Mad or something as well. People could, just write, if people have got handwritten recipes, you could imagine a tool where you could turn that into an actual Baking Mad recipe card with the timings and everything, and it's all displayed really neatly without the user having to fill in that information in fields. Pretty cool. So movie summaries, you can also kind of use it as a search engine. It's not a search engine, and it's not populated with live data. The data in this API, I think, it dates to 2019, so it's a little bit out of date. So it's not looking up things live or anything. It's not a search engine, but you can use it that way. So I'm gonna start doing some audience participation now, I think. So does someone want to pick a movie that is generally well liked? Anyone?
American Beauty.
American Beauty, okay. So what's it like? So what I've trained it to do here is to give me a thumbs up or thumb down based on how sentiment is generally to the movie. Sentiment analysis is a thing it can do, very smart. And then give me a really short summary. A middle-aged man who's dissatisfied with his life finds new meaning in it when he becomes obsessed with his teenage daughter's best friend, which I think is pretty accurate description of American Beauty. Likewise, I could put in a film which is pretty universally hated, like Jiggly, and it will recognize the sentiment there. FBI agent, mobster's girlfriend tried to turn a mobster in, and it's really cool. So you can imagine this for an editor that's got a stack load of things on their desk and they just want to know elevator pitch. Did people like this? Did people not like this? What was the general feeling about these things, and what's the bullet point summary? It can do that. Really cool. You can also give it free rein to be a bit more creative. Now, this one could be fun. Like, I've been having fun playing with this, and sometimes I've got some really great stuff out of it. Sometimes it goes wrong. I think we'll do it a few times here, and hopefully we'll get something good. Maybe we won't. We'll see. So I'll go to use DQ because I feel like you'll enjoy this one. So I'm going to ask you to pick a name. I suppose we could just do Dave.
I want Wakey.
You want Wakey? Okay. Wakey. So you can choose barbarian, dwarf, elf. I've picked some fantasy tropes, basically.
Definitely Goblin.
Goblin. He could be an archer, aristocrat, chieftain, inventor, knight, scholar, warlord, warrior, wizard.
Wakey's obviously a warlord, isn't he?
Wakey's a warlord. And we give him a sort of defining character trait.
Oh, savage.
Savage. Okay. So what I've kind of asked it to do here, and I've used a different model here. I've used a different AI engine. There's a few engines that you can choose from, which an engine sort of corresponds to how in depth the process of it's going to be. But I've used a slightly different one here, which is still a beta one. So we've got a beta API and then within that, a beta engine. So could go either way. But this is one that you don't necessarily have to prompt with any shots of data. So the way I've seen this is I've just said, tell me a story about such and such, and then I filled in the such and such from these gaps. So really short prompt and just see what it does. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's rubbish. So apologize in advance. Let's see what we get. Wakey was a goblin warlord who was born with a birthmark on his left eye. This birthmark made him a target for the other goblins to bully. He was always the last to be chosen for the raiding parties. He was the last to be given a weapon. He was always last to be given food. Wakey was always the last to be chosen to be killed. See, sometimes you get interesting stuff. It doesn't really have like emotion. So one day, Wakey decided to take his revenge on the world. He gathered a small group of goblins and they began to raid the nearby villages. They stole food, weapons, and gold. They killed any who dared to stand in their way. They eventually grew into a large army and took over the neighboring villages. Wakey became the goblin king and ruled the land with an iron fist. So it's a lot of fun. I mean,
biography as well.
Yeah, I love the way this has come out because this kind of has actually summed it all up. Really, sometimes you get things like he was always the last to be chosen to be killed. It's like, it doesn't really understand that that's not a thing, but it also comes up with details which are like really interesting. Like, okay, it's giving him a birthmark on his left eye, it's giving him that flavor. Like that he became the king and ruled the land with an iron fist. The whole passage makes sense. Like the whole passage has a story structure that actually makes sense. There's a setup, some stuff happens, there's a consequence, and then an action, then a consequence. I haven't trained it to do any of that stuff. All I've said is tell me a backstory about Wakey, the goblin warlord who's savage, kind of thing, and it's come out with that. Really cool. So this next one is Wakey will, and a couple of people will get a kick out of this, but I found this one really, really impressive for reasons which I'll try and explain. So lots of us here some of us here play Magic the Gathering. Now, I actually found this prompt online. This isn't a prompt I came up with, but you can train this AI. So you can train this AI to invent magic cards, basically. Now, it doesn't have any idea what Magic the Gathering is as a game. It doesn't. No human has sat down and go, I'm going to teach OpenAI, this API, the rules of Magic the Gathering, how it works, what a card is, blah, blah, blah. But with all the analysis it's done of all various bits of text and with 3 example like formats of cards, you can give it a name and it'll create a card. And I've been playing around with this, and sometimes they're not right, but a lot of the time they make a lot of sense. So I'm gonna do a demo, and then I'm gonna ask Wakey for I'll prompt Wakey while I'm doing the demo. So Wakey, I want you to think of a card name that's not a card that exists, but is one that if you were to say it to someone that plays Magic, they would have a good idea of the sort of color, trope, that kind of thing that it would fit into, like a familiar archetype. So I'm going to do an example here. So if I do like gargantuan spider, for example, and I'm going to make me a card. So it's come up with, so again, for people who play Magic will be familiar with the fact that spiders are usually green. I haven't told it that. Like, I have not prompted it to say the spiders are green. But from the word gargantuan, it knows from its analysis of text around the internet that spiders are green. However, that spiders frequently have an ability called reach, which again, I haven't prompted it. I haven't taught it the ability reach at all. That it's going to be big because I've said gargantuan. So it's got a high cost of 5 plus a green, and then it's high power and stuff. It's amazing. It's blowing my mind, this thing. So let's try another one. Go on, Wakey.
Terrible mistake.
Terrible mistake. Okay. So we're expecting this to be like an instant or sorcery or something, right?
Yeah, probably red or blue.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see how it goes. It can be a bit, from trying it can be a little bit flakier with things that aren't creatures. Sure. Let's see. Terrible mistake. Okay. this makes sense. It's gone with black. Return sorcery, return type permanent to its owner's hand, and it's got a madness cost. I mean,
love the madness. That's brilliant.
It's blown my mind. This thing.
It's so
amazing.
good.
It's so good. And yeah, I'll share with you afterwards the prompt that did this. But playing around with this yesterday has just made me be like, holy shit.
Do you reckon that's how wizards design their sets now?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. They're all yeah. I guess that's why in my preamble for this, I said how we're all going to be out of jobs, and it's like I was just thinking there's so many ways you can use this stuff. It's crazy.
Can we put Wakey the Goblin Warlord in there?
Wakey the Goblin Warlord. So we're expecting a legendary red creature.
6/6.
Let's see. Oh my god! I mean,
wow.
Okay, so you'll see it's messed up a little bit here. It's generated another creature underneath, but the top one, if we just look at the top bit of it, it's figured out that Wakey, like a named creature like Wakey the Goblin, would normally be legendary, and it's got it. I mean, it's blown my mind. Absolutely blown my mind. Let's move on before we start talking about MTG and losing the room too much. You can also use OpenAI as a grammar correction tool, and this is a sort of thing that I think is an application that could become widespread extremely quickly. So, for example, if I wrote I shouldn't have in here, fix it. It's going to change it to I shouldn't have, and like I are not good at spelling, something like that. Are not good. I'm not good at spelling. It can both do spelling corrections and grammar corrections. It's amazing, super cool. And again, that's just with a couple of prompts. That one I think was like 2 prompts initially. And so now we're going to go to a couple of examples that were along the lines of the more sort of Hollywood examples that we saw on the internet when this did the rounds a little bit last year. There were lots of ones where you saw like, oh, I want you to, build a page that's got 3 columns and a Google search bar and blah, 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 blah. I've not taken the time to build something as in-depth as that. I think, some in-depth stuff like that would need a lot more like really in-depth prompts. And I didn't really have the time to do that. And also I didn't want to burn through all my free credit testing it, because I think with those long prompts, it would have used quite a lot of my free credit. I'll explain about that in a second. But that looks like a watermelon. I could do something like that, hit generate, and it'll come back with a button that looks like a watermelon in that it's a round red button. It's got a green outline. You probably can't see it so well on the thing, and it is a button. I can click it. I could ask it for a table of US presidents and the year they died. Hopefully, it will give me a table of US presidents and the year they died. Eventually. It's mangled the table a little bit. Let's try that again.
CSS is hard, man.
CSS is hard. Yeah, exactly. There we go. Second time lucky. So, some things of note here. I in no way told it that the title of a table would look better bold, for example. I didn't do that. It's just figured that out based on everything it's processed, where it's doing a table in HTML and it's looking at the header things. It's like, oh, well, they're often bold, so I'm going to make them bold. That kind of stuff. Really, really cool. And then actually, I'll talk a little bit. I've been talking about like free credit and cost and stuff. I want to talk about this a little bit. So every time you make a request, you pay basically per character that gets processed, which they call a token, which roughly equates to a character. So the longer your prompt, the more you pay, and then you also pay for the response. So however long the response is, you pay for every character of the response as well. And it's not super expensive, but it's not super cheap. And okay, if you're using it for something that other tools can't do, like something like this, then great. But if you were to use it as a search engine, it would be an incredibly expensive search engine. For example, you wouldn't want to use it that way. It's just you can use it that way. But yeah, if you were to put this on a high traffic production website and give users free reign to this sort of tech, you could rack up massive bills pretty rapidly. So there's a cost prohibiting factor there a little bit. The final example is a little thing I've built. You can, and it can do this with loads of different programming languages, where it has all sorts of knowledge about programming. You can ask it to like write me a method in Ruby that sorts names alphabetically or stuff like that. And it can do it, or you can translate, like you can give it a thing in JavaScript and say translate this into Ruby, and it can do that. But I've tried to imagine something that's a little bit more like I could actually see this being a useful thing, and an interface to a database that doesn't require knowledge of SQL seems like a potentially quite a useful thing to me. So like say I just want to know all employees named Andy. You can get it to write SQL queries, so like staff and employees where name equals Andy. Or, for example, like a Baking Mad one, all recipes that contain cinnamon as an ingredient. If I could type, that'd be better. Select staff and recipes, join ingredients on ingredients.recipe ID equals recipes ID, where ingredients.name equals. I mean, like, yeah, mind blowing. All films released between 1980 and 1989. Let's say staff and films were released year between 1989, or like the title of all films. Select title from films. So it's just nuts. You can imagine writing a client thing that could give clients access to a database where they could actually query data in any way they want, and they can just use human language to do it. They don't have to worry about writing the query. Potentially also yeah, exactly. So I'll stop rambling now, but hopefully these few examples have given some idea as to just how widely encompassing this tech can be. So I had some final thoughts. I've got a video here which I won't play over Zoom because often the frame rate goes a bit iffy over Zoom. But I'll put a link to it in the channel. Like, I don't know if people have seen this this animatronic Groot that Disney have made, which is more just there's also similarly impressive things going on with like Boston Dynamics and stuff, like in robotics and things like that. Groot's a bad example because all it needs to say is "I am Groot" in response to stuff. But like you can, I guess my point is it really doesn't feel that far to me. Like, I'm thinking, even like 5 years or something now. It doesn't, with what I've seen from playing around with OpenAI, plus with how good voice recognition tech is getting on devices that we've got in our pockets and stuff, plus how advanced robotics is getting in terms of believable movement, being able to like bipedal walking, all that sort of stuff. It really doesn't feel that far away to me that someone is going to synergize all of these things together and basically make a robot that you can talk to and will reply in believable ways about a variety of stuff and will be able to do all sorts of different tasks. Yeah, I think it's going to happen soon. It's absolutely nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So anyway, I'm going to stop sharing now. Hopefully that's been a bit of fun. I certainly had a lot of fun doing this one because it's crazy tech. I will try to answer any questions if there are any.
A question. The dead presidents table, two different results when you click the button. I was kind of expecting like the same result every time.
Yeah. So when I I think I mentioned earlier on that you one of the things you can configure it to be is how flexible it can be in its responses, from like 0, where given the same input, it will always give you the same output, up to, the higher you get it, the more likely it is to just go off on wild tangents, or do its own thing, or start to, oh, you wanted a table of presidents, well, here, have a table of presidents and also a table of this and a table of this and a table of this, like loads of other stuff. So yeah, that's why with the HTML one, I had it in a sort of middling kind of setting, like a low middling setting, so you do get different responses each time.
I haven't got a question, but funnily, I was talking to an ex-colleague yesterday, and he was telling me about how the BBC are using this and the GPT-3 data set to try and see if they can help journalists build stories without them, and not actually, it's build a story and then send it out to the public. Although looking on the internet, I'm pretty sure that happens frequently. This is kind of just helping them curate a story to create a kind of skeleton, and then they can then evolve it into a real story to save them doing a lot of the legwork. And he said it's been amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine how well suited it is to that task, because you take like a news article, they have quite a common structure. They're all like, who, what, where, how, why, how, all that sort of stuff. So I can easily imagine it's like, okay, well, this is the gist of it, or just even those 5 W's or whatever they call it, and it will just generate the story for you. It can also do things like take legalese and translate it into human readable text. You can imagine getting a contract and just like getting, okay, well, tell me the bit I understand, that kind of stuff. Mad.
He was also saying about, I don't think it wasn't GPT-3, and I'm not even sure if it fits in AI, it might be machine learning. They were talking about the BBC's got an introducing service where they let members of the public be able to send their bands tracks in, so that they could potentially get airplay or get signed or moved on. And they get so many, it's almost impossible for a human to deal with. So they've been building a system using AI that can they fed it all of the playback from all of the radio stations. And so so it has an idea of what the BBC plays, and then they feed it all of these introducing tracks, and they can basically surface the ones that look like they would be A, good, and B, suitable. And it's allowed them to, get a lot more young bands, for example, exposure when they ordinarily might have just fallen under the carpet because someone didn't get time to look at it.
That's awesome. So cool. Piers.
Thanks, Andy. You mentioned at the beginning that this was originally set up with as a way to sort of demonstrate a more benevolent side of AI.
Yeah.
I mean, are there any controls or sort of ethical frameworks built into this setup?
No, and it's a good point. So it's I would describe GPT as both an astonishingly smart and also very dumb tool. So there's already been like a notorious incident where, well, somewhat notorious. It was done in controlled conditions, but the outcome is still not great. Where a group of some organization or other decided to try and use this for as a medical chatbot. Like, I'm gonna ask a bot about this medical problem. And they were advised not to do this. Like, OpenAI, don't do this. This is not what this tech is supposed to be used for. And I think the AI told someone with depression to commit suicide or something along those lines, something horrendous along those lines. Because as I kind of mentioned earlier, it doesn't have a concept of emotion. Everything it's learned in inverted commas, but everything it knows about the world just comes from an analysis of the relationship between words. So it doesn't yet have the ability to understand the nuance of, well, someone's asking me about this, they're probably going to be in this frame of mind when this isn't what they need to hear right now, that kind of stuff. It's just like, oh, they're talking about this topic. This is a valid response to this topic. So yeah, it doesn't have any inbuilt ethical things, but I think the ethical point is a really valid one, and it's only going to get more so, I think, as this tech evolves and is more widely integrated into consumer-facing solutions.
Presumably, especially given Microsoft have just invented $1 billion into it, and there's no kind of policing behind it, then.
Yeah, exactly.
But it just feels a bit weird.
And this would be an absolute doddle to make this thing. Well, you already see sites like Twitter are absolutely awash with bots and things like that. But it would be pretty much a doddle to get this thing to start pumping out fake news stories, fake tweets, fake comments on Facebook posts, all that sort of stuff. It'd be an absolute cinch to get it to do that. So yeah, there's a responsibility for devs to use this in a positive way. Cool.
Do you know if GPT-3 has been trained on non-English natural languages and whether it generalizes?
Say that again, sorry, Andrew.
So do you know if GPT-3 has been trained on natural languages that aren't English, and whether it would generalize to those languages if it hasn't?
So it has knowledge. So you can use it as a translator. So you can get it to translate from English into other languages. Whether it's I don't know is an answer to your question. I don't know. I would imagine that the majority of its knowledge is based on tokens that have been processed that were English to begin with. So whether you'd have success training it to sort of receive commands and respond in other languages, you might do, but you might not. Is the short answer. But it can be used to translate, so it does at least have some awareness of other languages and ability to work with them.
So would that translation be you prompting it with some English text, for example, and some text in another language? Right. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Great. Has anyone else got any questions, or are we done?
No, that was brilliant. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries. Thank you.
Very interesting.
So thanks, Andy.
Yeah,
Thanks,
cool.
Andy.
No worries.
Really interesting.
Cool. Well, we got another dev meet next week, haven't we, Dave?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I need a title still.
Cool. Excellent.
Perhaps you can ask the OpenAI.
Yeah. Do you want me to make your title builder?
Yes,
Dave?
please. Yes, please.
Cool.
Right.
Bye all.
Cheers. Bye.